museums. So I'm going to start at the Jewish Museum in Berlin. Some of you, I'm sure many of you will be there. And I wanted to show you this exhibit, which is around people coming to art, and there is a curiosity in Germany about the Jewish people. There are now about 100,000 Jews living in Germany, many of whom came from Russia after the fall of communism. But the original Jewish community that was killed during the war, there's a very small of them there. But this Jewish museum, the Liebskin building, which I assume that many of you have been to, have put on a range of exhibitions trying to engage people with the question is, what is a Jew? And you can come and ask a Jew a question. So this is, you can post questions and you can ask a Jew a question. So this notion that a Jew is an object is a very interesting phenomenon in a museum. And museums are increasingly doing this because people, there's a missing Jew and people want to understand what that's about. So I just wanted to introduce really the whole topic with the notion of recovering the Jewish story in Europe, and that Jewish museums are a lot about recovering. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote in a beautiful line that I think dominates a lot of what our work is about, is that the single most important challenge facing the Jewish people in Israel and the diaspora is to recover the Jewish story. And a lot of the work that is happening now in Europe in the heritage sector is about recovering that Jewish story. So they have this notion of rent a Jew, which sounds so awful, but the idea was to engage audiences. The Berlin Jewish Museum, the Liebskin building, is just opened a Jewish children's museum and using the imagery of Noah's Ark and focusing on those Bible stories. Also an interesting motif and a way to engage children. At the Jewish Museum in Berlin, one of its research programs, and then which became an educational program, is to look at looted art. After the war, I'm going to assume all of you know a little bit about everything here, but the issue of stolen art and looted art and how to restitute those art pieces has become a huge issue. And this is an example, this is a picture of people taking away that art. Some of you know Monuments Men, which was a sort of glorified Hollywood view of the recovery of Jewish art, was very, and also the movie, Ronald Lauder had the picture, the Klimt picture. Yeah, the whole issue of restitution is extremely interesting. Somebody said the title. And we have a collection of looted art. This was what was, this is in Hanover. Okay, Lady in the Gold. Many museums have collections of what was recovered after the war in no particular, in a sort of random order, just of items that in themselves speak about domestic life of the Jews, the silverware for Shabbat, the eating utensils, your teacups, pots and saucers. Jews had a life, and although there's no people there, these are emblematic of what was left. So the whole question of restitution is a huge issue. Some governments have instituted restitution laws and have returned money to the communities or returned Jewish buildings to Jewish communities. Some countries do not have restitution laws. There's someone just entered the meeting room. So that's, and it's an interesting topic, the notion of people being able to reclaim their citizenship and get passports. One could argue perhaps that's a type of restitution as well. And this is just one more from many, and many museums, also not just Jewish museums, you can come and you bring items to the museum, but the one in Berlin has a program of people bringing in items that they may have found in their houses. They may not know who they belong to previous Jewish residents possibly, and they record the stories of these items. So building an archive of these items that are randomly found nowadays also adds to a museum's collection. We are, we're going to moved from Berlin to, I think I saw Connie on the list here. She'll be able to tell us. This is the new Jewish museum in Poland, Polin it's called, from the, use the word Polin, to rest here. And it's an extraordinary building that was opened about 5 or 6 years ago to a lot of fanfare. It has comes to visit, stabilize and I've got Jewish in Poland. I think about its is it's not Holocaust. It's not saying that the Jews, the experience of this was the Holocaust. Clearly, that was a huge.
I think we'd better if everybody turned their microphones off, then we wouldn't have this interference, please.
Things in the museum. Those of you who have been in it may have seen a replica based on the art and architecture of late 17th and early 18th century synagogue, which once stood in, it's G-W-O-Z-D-Z-I-E-C, Gvoch, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's on a scale of 85% of what the original shul looked like. It was a wooden synagogue, which was quite typical at the time, but most of those were burnt down during the Holocaust. And this is a faithful rebuilding of it. Researchers used photographs and architectural plans to reconstruct the building. One of the interesting things about this Polin Museum, they have, as you can see from the list up here, they've got a huge educational project, oral history project, genealogy, and they have a terrific photo database. So if you want, you know, these are interesting things with time on your hands to have a look at these websites, because they have tremendous amounts of information. They attract thousands of children's school groups from Poland. So it's a central place for Polish people to learn about Jewish history in Poland. And of course, those of you who have been on tours to Auschwitz, it's likely you've come here as well, that the sort of March of the Living visits to Auschwitz, which they in themselves can be an hour, more than an hour's discussion about the ethics of those trips and the issues around those trips. But how do you put Auschwitz and the concentration camps into some sort of historical context? And I think the work that they're doing at Polin is a very good example of that. It's a very interesting museum, and certainly has put Warsaw on the map. And I think that the museum actually won several, well, I know it won several awards, and most recently I think it was the European Museum of the Year, not the Jewish Museum per se, but of all the museums. And the chief curator, a woman named Barbara Kirschenblatt-Gimblet, who you might come across if you're interested in this field, is really a world expert on Jewish museums, and has contributed a huge amount, went to live in Poland for 10 years or so to work on this. She's originally from the States, although her family, I believe, is from Poland, Ukraine area. From Poland, we're skipping over, not too far. Can anyone recognize where we are? This is in Prague. This is the Jewish Museum of Prague.
Yes.
Yeah.
Prague.
Right. The Jewish Museum of Prague and the Jewish Cemetery. The most well-known sites in Prague, in the whole Jewish quarter there that you walk around. There are many different aspects of the museum. It was founded in 1906 by the historian Dr. Hugo Lieben and Dr. Augustin Stein. They became the head of the Prague Jewish community. And as many museums, the purpose was to document history and customs of the Jewish population of the Czech lands, as well as to preserve artifacts from Prague synagogues that were demolished at the beginning of the 20th century as part of an urban renewal plan in the city. When the Nazis came, the museum became the Central Bureau for Jewish Emigration. Its name was apparently later changed to the Central Bureau for the Arrangement of the Jewish Question in Bohemia and Moravia. There are different synagogues that are part of the museum. And I think the next picture is from the Spanish synagogue in the museum. If you go there, you can see the vitrines. There are different things on display there. There's a lot to see in Prague. Like some of the other communities, these museums help fund the Jewish communities, so that the museums are funded by the state, but they also receive funding from outside funders, and the funding helps the communities to thrive. So you now have, although Chabad, the whole interplay with Chabad in some of these museums is also, some of these Jewish communities is also very interesting, because Chabad will go where no one else goes, and yet there is often an indigenous local community that struggles to find its own place as well within that landscape. You have in many of these communities Jews who didn't know they were Jewish. I've met many Jews who tell me that at the age of 20, 25, even older, they discover their Jewish roots. Often when a parent is dying and a parent on their deathbed admits to their Jewish heritage, and that the impact on the child. For some children, it has a life-changing impact that they then become engaged in their Jewishness. Some seek to convert, others don't. Some become involved in Jewish heritage. Some just walk away from it. Some it makes no difference to them, that extra knowledge. So it is a very interesting phenomena. And that's sort of what I know this talk is around touring around Europe, but actually what I wanted to give you a flavor of was some of the challenges of also maintaining that heritage and what Jewish communal life is like. And if those of you who have spent time with any of these communities may have an inkling of that as well. In 1994, after the Velvet Revolution, the buildings that were used by the museum, used by the Nazis during that phase, were returned to the Jewish community, as well as the Jewish cemetery. And as I say, they help support the Jewish community. There was flooding in 2002. But apparently things were not ruined. There's a huge archival collection at the museum as well. So documents and photographs, all sorts of things there. Where do we go to next? This is, does anyone know where this is? This is in Amsterdam, the Beversmarks, well, not the Portuguese synagogue, upon which the Beversmarks synagogue is based in London. And what's interesting about Amsterdam, this is another one in Amsterdam. What's interesting about Amsterdam, they have created what's called a Jewish cultural quarter. So, and it's funded part by the government and through the tour. They see it as a really important tourist area. And you have several institutions close together. You've got the Historical Museum. You've got the Children's Museum. It's a beautiful museum there. You've got this Portuguese synagogue, which is the interior of it. You have the Eitzheim Library. This is an inside shot of that. The library holds many manuscripts that are very rare, and this is I just took from their pages here. You have to, and you can search all of these. They have one of the largest collections in in Europe, if not the largest collection of manuscripts. And it's in the building next to the Portuguese synagogue. And it's not like a tourist site, but you can go and use it. And the scholars who work there are very highly regarded. The museum also has connected to it a Holocaust Memorial, and have recently started to renovate that, and have generated a lot of government funding has come to that. The whole, I'm going to use the word business, and I mean it as a business in a negative sense, of Holocaust memorialization throughout Europe has generated a lot of controversy. I'm sure you all know about the one outside Westminster in the UK, and the cost of that, which apparently is about 100 million, of which the government has pledged, or about, I'm not sure what they've actually agreed to at the moment, 50 million, meaning that the community needs to raise the other 50 million, and the controversy around that. Similarly, in countries across Europe, you know, who should be paying for a what should a Holocaust memorial look like? Who should be paying for it, and who is it for? And these are very big questions. The Dutch government have now put in a lot of money towards the a renewed Holocaust memorial. Of course, you have the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam, which is possibly the most visited. I don't know the exact numbers, but certainly one of the most visited places. And so people feel, well, they've seen Anne Frank, they've done the Holocaust. And the challenge of the Anne Frank story is it's become so universalized and so what I would say deracinated of the Jewish experience, that I think that's been really problematic. And I think even through this COVID thing, I saw somebody tweet, some celebrity tweet, "I feel like Anne Frank, stuck at home." There was a huge outcry about that, but that shows the way it's been so trivialized and the dangers of that trivialization. Again, this is another topic on its own about how Holocaust memorials are used and abused. So that's in Amsterdam. We're just going to quickly go to the Jewish Museum in Manchester. That is now undergoing a big renovation. I think it was meant to open this year, but got delayed and should open next year. And it's going to be a beautiful building and interesting collection. But what the museum have done now, and the way they've positioned itself, is very much to be a cultural center. So you can see, this was taken a little while ago, they're putting on concerts, they have interfaith dialogue. They see it very much, it's Jewish, but it's actually a very broad, bringing in people from all faiths, all cultures as a venue. So seeing the museum as in a different sort of light, as a sort of just a classical place where you come and look at stuff, but it's seeing it as a bit more of a cultural center in a way. And that's a shift in museums generally. Partly to generate revenue, but partly to make them more living and breathing, and to create not just, I suppose it's material culture, not just material culture of items, but immaterial culture, so music. This is also a cultural experience. So museums hosting these sort of cultural experiences. And the museum in Manchester is a little bit reinventing itself in that way, which is an interesting development. Right, this is very different. We're going to move away from museums for a little bit. I just want to find my notes. And we are going to a place called Alanta. Alanta is a village in the eastern part of Lithuania, north of Vilnius. And this synagogue was built in the last third of the 19th century, and it's one of the few remaining wooden synagogues of Lithuania. Most of the Jews were killed there in August of 1941, and unsurprisingly, there are no Jews there now. However, the building is listed in the Register of Cultural Heritage and protected by the state. So there has been a development of countries, Eastern European countries, recognizing that these buildings have a part of the cultural heritage of their country. So they've put up a poster there, a signage. The synagogue served as a grain store during Soviet times, but it was returned to the Lithuanian Jewish community, but in very poor condition. So it's a real dilemma, because the Jewish community may receive these buildings as part of their restitution, but actually if you don't have the money to repair them, and if you don't have a viable Jewish community to look after them, and it's in the middle of nowhere, because in Vilnius you do have a small community, but here you have no community, what is that responsibility that's given to the Jewish community is a real challenge. And in a way, it's at some level, perhaps it's a way for the government to abdicate their responsibility, yet also say, see, we've given it back to the Jews. So it's a very difficult thing. The groups do come, and I'm sure, tourists, there are heritage trails, the digitization of heritage and making these mobile apps on your phone, so if you go visit a place you can download all sorts of information, has enabled this material to be more well known about. But for years, clearly this building stood there deteriorating. You can see the windows look pretty bad, and I don't have a photo of inside. Similarly, you have in Wales, I don't know if any of our Welsh contingent are online, but in Merthyr Tydfil was the industrial powerhouse of Wales in the 19th century and its largest town. There had been a Jewish presence there since the 1830s, and the construction of this synagogue was in the 1870s, and that reflects a prosperous and growing community. It's designed in a Gothic revival style, and apparently the oldest purpose-built synagogue still standing in Wales. Now, again, here's a challenge. The Jewish community formally came to an end in 1983 when the synagogue was sold.
Teacher, shut up.
Since that time, the building's been used for various purposes, but apparently since 2006, it's been lying empty. Its condition is deteriorating, and the fabric of the building is being compromised by the gaping hole in the roof and the broken windows. Does that sound similar? But they don't have a Peter Zinken or everybody else that has worked to restore our building. So what to do with this sort of building? There is an idea of building a Welsh Jewish Heritage Centre that would recognise, celebrate and educate about the Jewish community in Wales. I'm not sure where that's up to at the moment, but it gives you a sense of what some of the challenges are with old buildings. Apparently the local municipality are looking at what they could do with this centre, and it could become, again, an interfaith centre, intercultural centre, but recognising the Jewish contribution. Okay, I just wanted to show you a website that you might find very useful, and if anybody's interested, I'm happy to send you a few links after the talk. This is a website called Jewish Heritage Europe, and I've just given you one page. It has thousands of pages. There's a woman named Ruth Gruber. Some of you may have read her materials. She's like the queen of Jewish heritage in Europe in terms of documenting, she's a news reporter, so keeping an update of all the news around Jewish heritage. And she built this website, which, as you can see, has resources on cemeteries, countries. There's a map there. I don't want to lose my sharing screen, but you can click on a country, and it'll come up with all sorts of resources under these different topics of heritage sites, research and education, etc. So there is a huge amount of material out there if you're interested in this field. Okay. Any guesses? Probably a bit difficult to guess. This is in Izmir in Turkey. There is a huge project going on called the Izmir Project to recreate the Jewish community, not the Jewish, the Jewish synagogues and Jewish ghetto. It wasn't a ghetto, but an area. There is a small Jewish community in Izmir, about 1,000 people. There were 9 synagogues in this area. This is the derelict Eitz Chaim synagogue. It's believed to be the oldest one in Izmir and dates back to the 14th or 15th century, and was later rebuilt a little bit. Tourism is motivating a renovation. The Turks, I don't want to get political, but Turkey has a government that is not particularly liberal, and yet it's often convenient to show a little bit of multi-faith, and so if you have a little bit of a Jewish content somewhere, you're able to sort of show your Jewish, your interfaith and freedom of religion experience in your country. So the tourism ministry in Izmir is supportive of this project and has contributed some money, but there is also fundraising going on from, by many different people. So there was the local Izmir community, Izmir tourist industry donated money towards the preservation of this synagogue. Now also in Izmir, what was found were a lot of textiles, a lot of parochets from destroyed synagogues, these 9 synagogues that I mentioned. And perhaps if somebody could turn off their mute, if they could mute themselves, there's some noise in the back. We found a huge cache of parochets in terrible condition, and we wanted to
Ruth.
right, somebody needs to mute. Somebody needs to know how to mute everybody else.
Do you want it with raisins in?
Tell Ruth Gladman to turn it off. Ask Ruth to turn it off.
Okay, I've muted her. We found a lot of parochets, and so the university in Izmir partnered with experts from Finland. And this is a group of Finnish students who came to Turkey over 3 summers to work on these parochets. Now, they're not experts in parochets, in synagogue materials, but they're experts in textiles, and that's what was needed. There was somebody else who could sort of decipher the Hebrew on the parochets. Anyway, this is the lab where they sat, and over 3 summers, these Finnish students came. I mean, the thought of the internationalism of the project is interesting as well. That they worked on these parochets, about 90, 100 of them. At some point, they'll all go up on exhibition, but now they are at least stored in acid-free, wrapped up in acid-free material, stored safely and away from fire. And that is a part of the cultural heritage of Turkey. What's interesting in Turkey, I'm just checking if I've got any more. Right, that's another, no, that's not Turkey, that's somewhere else. I'll get to that in a moment. What's interesting in Turkey is that the Jewish Museum in Istanbul is receiving items from Jews who are leaving Turkey. Not any Jew, many Jews who can get out of Turkey. So you need money, and you can go to Israel, but if you don't want to go to Israel, wherever you want to go, if you can get out, are not looking back. They are depositing materials in the Jewish Museum in Turkey. And there's a certain poignancy about that they don't see that they'll be able to reestablish Jewish life back in Istanbul. And, one wonders what other countries will feel like that. And one wonders what will happen to the materials, because materials that were destroyed by Nazis is one thing. Materials that are being abandoned by Jews who leave a place is another thing. And what is the responsibility of Jews to those materials when they choose to voluntarily leave a place? It's a question. Believe me, I have no answers. I spend my days thinking about these questions, and then have more questions, and then have a headache. Okay, so that's Turkey. This is in Romania. This is the Ashkenazic Great Synagogue in the Romanian port of Constanta. It was designed in the Moorish style by Alfred Linz and was built between 1910 and 1914. It's a disastrous condition, and these are from photos taken in 2014. As far as I'm aware, nothing has been done to renovate this or to clear it up. Now, what's interesting, repair used by the small Jewish community there, which is pretty much dissipated. But this raises the issue, what is the point of restoring a synagogue? So I've said to you, it's sat there since this is a photo 6 years ago. I'm sure it's only gotten worse. Well, okay, so it gets worse. Well, what's the point? That's a question I ask you. Is there a point in restoring this? The one in Turkey, is there a point? And if it's not a whole synagogue, should part of it be restored? Should a plaque go up that a synagogue was there? I don't know. These are, again, as I said, questions. This is in Bratislava. The Jewish community of Bratislava is very small. It belonged to the Slovakian, it was Czechoslovakia, was split. And this is in Bratislava. This is the shul that has been renovated. And there is a small community that meets there regularly. And this on my right-hand side, where the exhibition that you can see is the upstairs of the synagogue, and is where the ladies' gallery is. I think the ladies probably, I don't know if many women come to shul. I think they sit downstairs in one of the sections now, actually. I have been here a few times, in fact. It's the only remaining synagogue in Bratislava. It's located close to the historic town centre. And it was also at a time when Bratislavan Jews no longer had to reside exclusively in a ghettoed area. They were able to come in closer into the main centre. It was built in, it was finished building in 1926. Those of you who've been there may have also been to the burial site of the Khatam Sofer, who is in Bratislava. It's just by the train tracks, and you go downstairs and there's his grave and a tombstone and glass partitions all around it. And you will see many Hasidim coming there, well, not just Hasidim, many people coming there to put little notes there as a place of pilgrimage. What I haven't addressed in my talk, and may come up towards the end, is the whole notion of pilgrimages to heritage sites. I'm sure you saw the pilgrims to Uman before Rosh Hashanah. Some were turned back because of the whole Corona business. But the notion of Jews going to visit a place, largely Hasidim going to visit their Rebbe, so a person, Lubavitchers will go to New York, other groups will go to see their Rebbe in Israel, some will come to London to see their Rebbe, but actually to go to a place, to go to a grave where a Rebbe is, or to the Ohel, the grave, is, I don't know enough history, whether it's a recent phenomena. I suppose it's a recent phenomenon that thousands of people go because it's cheap airlines. So that's a practical reason. There's a lot more of it now. But I suppose also their grave sites might not have been known for a long time or not looked after. But there's a whole phenomena in Jewish heritage around pilgrimage sites. So we are now going to Frankfurt. And this is the Judengasse in Frankfurt. It used to be one of the most important centers of Jewish life in Europe. The museum, it's been open for a while, but it just reopened literally a few weeks ago. And then it closed a couple of days later because of COVID. It's a whole new renovation and a new design, new core exhibition. And also a little while ago, this area was excavated, and they found this is from the archaeological remains of 5 houses from Frankfurt's Judengasse, the Jewish quarter area, that make up the very core of the museum. And it's really wonderfully done. That's been there for a while already. The new core exhibition is the more modern part of it. The exhibition gives you a view of everyday Jewish life in the early modern era. How did they live? Who lived in the houses? You can sort of get they talk about, I don't believe there were any Rothschild houses because the Rothschilds did live in the Juden Gusta, but they have got actually a Rothschild house museum that's on that, in that Platz there as well. This Jewish has won quite a lot of awards as well. Okay, so if you're going to Germany has a lot of Jewish museums. Some of them are old shuls that have been turned into museum space. And there may be no Jews in the area, but there is a Jewish museum. And that's another interesting phenomena about Jewish life, about Jewish heritage, is that it exists now where there are no Jews or very few Jews, and that the people looking after Jewish heritage, many of them are not Jewish. We're very used to in England and in the States and Australia, where I'm from, where there are large Jewish communities, vibrant communities, and the people looking after the Jewish stuff generally are Jews. And you might have the one person who's not Jewish who happens to be interested. It's almost the other way around in many of these countries, where the stewards of Jewish history and Jewish heritage are not Jewish. Some of them, they're attracted to it, like I said before, they discover they've got some Jewish ancestry. Some of them just, it's just interesting. They recognize that Jews are interesting, that Jews made a contribution to their country, and they want to learn about it. And we have to be extremely grateful to those people because they are stewarding Jewish heritage, to it, you know, with tremendous devotion and passion. That's in Frankfurt. I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of some contemporary Jewish art: roads in Greece, a breastplate in Rome, and a modern piece in Berlin. I just like the pictures. Okay, I'm going to take you back to Poland. Some of you, I hope you've all heard of, and if you haven't, that's the first thing you should look up after this talk, is called the Oneg Shabbos. During the war, a group of people called the Oneg Shabbos took it upon themselves to write about what was going on, to write their diaries, to write about daily life. This material was hidden. It was dug underground. Some of it was put in milk bottles. Some of it was in milk big tins, milk tins, and some of it was put into boxes. And after the war, and I should know the dates just escaped me, there was a discovery of what of the what's called the Ringelblum archives, or the Oneg Shabbos. The Ringelblum was a journalist, and there's an institution that's named after him. And this is discovering these documents. It's a very important set of documents, and this is the institute, the Ringelblum Institute, and there's a library here. It's a sort of complement to the Jewish Museum that we talked about at the beginning. This is the milk can that, now I have to admit, and if Connie or Jonathan Webber is on the phone, they can explain it afterwards. I'm actually not sure if this is a replica or one of the original milk cans. I had conflicting messages. This sits in the Polin Jewish Museum, and I've had conflicting reports. There is apparently one more milk can to be discovered that is sitting underneath the current Chinese embassy in Warsaw. It's a very moving story. I'm not doing justice to it, but the fact that during the war, people were conscious that they have to write for the future of for the future, schreib, to write and to write, so that people would know what happened. And we know now how important documentation is. And we don't think about it now because we're all on our computers and sending WhatsApp messages. But you know, I don't know how many of you write in a diary anymore, but that writing on pieces of paper has saved our history. So as I said, if there's one thing you take away from here, look up the Oneg Shabbos. And just in Poland, one more bit just to tie in with the community. There is now a Jewish community center in Krakow, Reinvigorating Jewish Life. There are dilemmas, there are issues. It's not straightforward, but it's an interesting development. It is a phenomena. This is the one that Prince Charles sort of initiated with World Jewish Relief. But there are materials now being written in Polish, in Hungary, all languages. I mean, we've just talked about Poland, in Hungary, in Romania, in Bulgaria. All these countries now have Jewish community centers post-1989 that are rebuilding Jewish life. And it's extremely, extremely interesting. Okay, we've had Jewish life. There is, as you know, Jewish death. And Jewish funerals, Jewish cemeteries are a tremendous source of information and an important source of information, and they act as memorials for when we don't have people alive, and for these they become emblematic of a community that once was. So this picture is about documenting all the Jewish cemeteries in Bavaria, and taking the inscriptions, because the inscriptions are important for genealogists, because it tells us who was there, what years, their siblings. If you think about Bushy Cemetery, you know, the words people choose to put on a tombstone, whatever nice things they say about you, it's also your lineage, and thinking about who, you know, how are you going to record who came before you and who's come after you. And if you think about the tombstone in that way, it's an extremely important piece of family history. So there are a lot of initiatives to renovate restore cemeteries. There are some questions about, you know, how much money should be plowed into this as opposed to supporting Jewish life. These are big strategic philosophical questions, but there are many different projects. This is a cemetery in Worms, actually. There's a new museum that's started in Worms, which tells the story of what's called the Shul cities, Speyer, Worms, and Mainz. They were all near each other on the Rhine River, and they combined to form a major Jewish center in the Middle Ages. So there's a cemetery there that they're doing some research on, and this is Rashi's house in Worms, and this is part of the exhibition there. His house stands next to the Worms Synagogue, which was built in the Middle Ages and destroyed in World War II and totally rebuilt from rubble after the war. I'm just conscious of time. This is a photo by Ruth Gruber that I mentioned before, her website. If you want to go onto her website, you'll see a whole fantastic photos there. I like this tombstone. I don't know that they do it so much anymore. If you see here the hands, this tells you it was a woman, and it's the hands of blessing the, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. This was a priest. This would be a priest. Hands, and then you have other ones where you've got the candlesticks in the woman's hands. So you've got this iconography on tombstones, which is very interesting to see. Sometimes you'll see a pushka, a little tzedakah box. So they were a big philanthropist. You know, again, how you want to be remembered or what people know you as. I'm doing a quick little shout out to manuscripts. This is from the Catalan Mahzor, which is very important and very beautiful. I'm just looking at the time, and I also have the Sarajevo Haggadah. Many of you will have heard of this. It is extremely important Haggadah. It was, hold on. It's in Sarajevo. It's in the museum there. It originated in about the 14th century Spain, and we think it might have been made as a wedding present, celebrating the union of two families whose coat of arms appear in the bottom corners of the book. There's another sort of picture from it, and it's in a sort of temperature-controlled exhibition space. The Haggadah apparently left Spain after the expulsion of Jews in 1492, traveled throughout Europe, and most likely arrived in Sarajevo with Jews who found refuge there during the 16th century. It's in the National Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina. They acquired it in 1894. It was sent to Vienna for authentication, and then returned to Sarajevo. When the Nazis occupied Sarajevo, one of the first objects that they sought out was actually the Sarajevo Haggadah. However, extraordinarily, the director of the National Museum kept it out of the Nazis' reach and was able to hide it. There are a few legends around its safekeeping during World War II. One story, and I just don't know the truth, is that the book was taken to a mosque in a village up on a mountain where the imam hid it beneath the mosque, and then it was returned later on. Another story is it was buried under a tree. I just don't know. There have been attempts to get it out of Sarajevo for better safekeeping because it's been a war-ridden country, but the government won't let it go. It's probably they won't let it go. It'd be interesting to know what conditions they might let it go under. Okay, I'm going to take you to Italy, to the old Jewish ghetto of Padua. Interestingly, there's a project there to renovate the ghetto there and make it another sort of tourist area. Whether, I don't know how successful that's going to be. It's a 3-year project to revitalize the Jewish heritage sites there. There is a little museum there. There's a synagogue there. It's very ornate in the Padua synagogue. I believe there's a small community there. Italy has 21 different Jewish communities. The largest is Rome, Milan, but then there are scattered, and that's in Padua. Now in Rome, they have just to go back to materials again, they have a beautiful collection of Torah binders. So they would, after the Torah's wrapped up as a scroll, they would wrap them in these beautiful binders. And I just wanted to show you a couple of them. So they're the binders, and then they also have this collection of parochets, and they're on display. They're very proud of their display there. And this is in Venice. Many of you, I'm sure, have been to the Venice ghetto, which is a very popular tourist site, and has several synagogues. This is just from one of the synagogues inside. They are rebuilding the Jewish Museum in Venice at a huge cost. The city of Venice is contributing, and it will be a beautiful museum when it's finished. And just to wind up, given the festive Hanukkah around the corner, I just wanted to show you, we're back still in Italy actually, in Padua. They had a exhibition of Chanukiot, modern and old ones. And this is just a couple of photos of people visiting these Hanukkah exhibition. And again, very few Jewish visitors, but people wanting to understand, what is Jewish life about? What is the aspect of Jewish culture? And more Chanukiot that were on display. And I think the last one's just a little boy to wish you a Chag Sameach and a happy Hanukkah. This was a part of an exhibition, an activity, a little boy lighting a Chanukiah. So I've raised for you lots of issues. I know we were meant to finish at 2. I apologize. I know we started a little late. So I'm happy to take questions if people have time, if they have interest. We didn't go to Hungary. We didn't go to Bulgaria. Probably a few other places we didn't go to, where there's also wonderful Jewish heritage happening and people who are stewarding that Jewish heritage. So happy to answer any questions. You can unmute yourself, I believe, unless I need to unmute you.
Rosalind Whitty, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Actually, it's one question and one comment. The question is, I read somewhere that there is a display at the British Library of Hebrew manuscripts. And the comment is, I've been a volunteer at the Jewish Museum in London, and very few of the staff seem to be Jewish nowadays. I mean, before the lockdown, which to me seems an awful shame. That's it.
That's okay. Why is it an awful shame?
Well, because I feel that it should have Jewish staff to answer questions. Certainly on a Sunday, there's hardly anybody to answer a proper Jewish question if non-Jewish people ask it.
Okay. Thank you for the comment. Any other questions? More comments?
No? Okay, well, if no one's
Yes,
got
I've got one comment, and that is the in Llandudno, which is also in Wales. There's a similar building, slightly Gothic style, but in this situation, it's been taken over by Chabad, which is probably a trend in a lot of places. But the interesting point about it is if you go inside it, you can see the plaques on the wall, which give a very good insight into middle of the road Anglo Jewry in the 30s and 40s. You know, you see the local businessmen, what they did, and the board of governors. And it's quite an interesting insight, I would say, into provincial Jewry at that time. That's in Llandudno.
Right. There's so many elements of Jewish heritage, and there's sort of how Jews lived and sort of recording that. There's how the buildings, there's the manuscripts. I didn't really touch on archives. I mean, through my work, we're involved in huge projects to digitize thousands and thousands of pages of Jewish archives that many of them have not been touched before, not been researched. We're starting a big project to discover archives that are hidden in damp cupboards in Eastern Europe. There's a lot to be done. So you've got that element, you've got the people's lives, you've got the museums that are representing Jewish life, and it's this whole sort of, and then you've got Jews who are living their Jewish life now in communities. So it's really quite a complex tapestry. I'll just make the comment about Chabad taking over. What's interesting, I'll give you the example of Venice. So it's a wonderful city. So Chabad goes to Venice. Great, they're providing Shabbat meals. They've got a minyan there, fantastic. None of them are Italian. None of them, well, I shouldn't say, I'm not aware that any of them are Italian. They're catering to the American audience, largely American tourists, English tourists, whatever. The local Venetian community, so what do they serve? Gefilte fish, schnitzels, whatever Ashkenazi overweight Jews eat. The Venetian Jews are very upset because it's not about it's not about Venetian Jewish culture. There is Venetian Jewish food, there are Venetian Jewish rituals. Whereas however, when a group comes in, and it could have been a different Kirov organization, doesn't have to have been Chabad, when a group comes in and takes over a place without enough sensitivity to the traditions of the place, it perverts the notion of Jewish heritage. Because what they are doing is, I don't like the word colonializing, but in a sense, that's what they're doing. They're imposing a view of Jewry that is not authentic to the place. And I think that's very problematic. And Venice isn't, I just happen to know Venice quite well in that regard. And I think that's, again, another challenge. As I said, I'm only presenting challenges. There are no easy answers here.
I'm going to wind this up now by saying thank you very much to Sally. And first of all, thank you for showing us pictures of places, which I'm sure some of us have been to some of them, but none of us have been to all of them. And also for raising these issues, which puts a completely different perspective on the aspect of preservation, raising the difficulties and the issues associated with the community and the government and those kinds of things as well. So thank you very much. Apologies for the technical blips at the beginning. I hope this has been recording. It should be recording all the time. And Sally, I hope you'll come back and give us another presentation and take us to some other places another time.
With pleasure, with pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.